Are you tired of feeling constantly overwhelmed, your thoughts spiraling, emotions a chaotic mess, every small thing leading to self-sabotage? Imagine a life where you break free. This video explores Daniel Chidiac's transformative wisdom from stop letting everything affect you. Discover how to conquer overthinking, master emotional chaos, and eliminate self-sabotage, unlocking profound peace and unwavering personal power. The journey to truly breaking free begins with a profound, almost uncomfortable realization. The vast majority of our suffering does not stem from external events themselves, but rather from our interpretation, reaction, and subsequent internal amplification of those events. We are not merely passive recipients of circumstance. We are active, often unconscious, participants in creating our own emotional landscapes. This fundamental understanding forms the cornerstone of disarming the very forces that seem to constantly pull us into states of overwhelm and disquiet. It necessitates a deep dive into the intricate dance between external triggers and our internal world, illuminating how readily we surrender our inner peace to the whims of the outside world. Consider the myriad ways everything seems to affect us. A casual comment from a colleague, an unexpected bill, a delay in traffic, an unfavorable social media post, a headline on the news, or even the weather. Each of these can act as a subtle or sometimes jarring external trigger. On their own, these occurrences are often neutral or fleeting. Yet, our minds, particularly when operating on autopilot, possess an extraordinary capacity to seize upon these triggers and transform them into potent internal narratives. This transformation is where the real drama unfolds. It's where a simple delay becomes a catastrophic event symbolizing our lack of control, where a critical remark morphs into definitive proof of our inadequacy, and where an unforeseen obstacle is interpreted as an insurmountable barrier. We allow these external stimuli to penetrate our inner sanctuary, not just by observing them, but by giving them undue weight, assigning them personal meaning, and then permitting them to dictate our emotional state, our focus, and ultimately our actions. This constant interpretation and amplification are the fertile ground for overthinking to take root and flourish. Overthinking is far more than just deep contemplation. It is a relentless, often circular mental activity characterized by rumination, catastrophizing, and the exhaustive replay of past events or anxious anticipation of future ones. It's the mind attempting to solve problems that don't exist, control outcomes that are uncontrollable, or gain certainty in inherently uncertain situations. We dissect conversations, agonize over decisions already made, and construct elaborate what-if scenarios that rarely materialize, yet consume vast amounts of mental energy. This mental loop traps us in a perpetual state of analysis paralysis, preventing decisive action and eroding our confidence. The insidious nature of overthinking lies in its deceptive promise of safety or control. We believe that by thinking more, we are preparing better, when in reality, we are often just spinning our wheels, generating more anxiety and exhausting our cognitive resources, leaving us mentally fatigued and emotionally drained. Directly fueled by overthinking and a lack of awareness, emotional chaos manifests as a turbulent, unregulated inner landscape. This isn't merely experiencing emotions, it's being entirely swept away by them, feeling at the mercy of intense fluctuations of anxiety, anger, sadness, fear, frustration, and resentment. In this state, emotions are not processed or understood. They are reacted to impulsively, often disproportionately to the triggering event. There's a profound disconnection from the ability to observe one's feelings from a place of calm detachment. Instead, emotions become the lens through which reality is perceived, distorting judgment and driving erratic behavior. This continuous cycle of emotional upheaval is deeply exhausting, both mentally and physically. It impairs our ability to maintain healthy relationships, to make sound decisions, and to experience sustained periods of inner peace. The feeling of being out of control becomes a dominant narrative, perpetuating a sense of helplessness and reinforcing the belief that our internal world is inherently unstable and unmanageable, making us acutely vulnerable to whatever everything throws our way. The culmination and often unconscious expression of overthinking and emotional chaos is self-sabotage. This insidious pattern involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that actively undermine our own success, happiness, growth, and well-being, despite our conscious desires for positive outcomes. It manifests in countless forms: procrastination on crucial tasks, perfectionism that leads to inaction, avoidance of necessary discomfort, negative self-talk that chips away at confidence, or repeatedly choosing familiar comfort over transformative challenge. The roots of self-sabotage are often deeply embedded in unconscious fears: fear of success, fear of failure, fear of judgment, or even the fear of the unknown that comes with stepping outside a familiar, albeit painful, comfort zone. It's a subtle yet powerful mechanism our mind employs to keep us safe by preventing us from truly stretching our capabilities, pursuing our dreams, or forming deep, meaningful connections. By self-sabotaging, we inadvertently reinforce limiting beliefs about ourselves and perpetuate cycles of unfulfillment. Staying stuck in a narrative where external circumstances or our inherent flaws are blamed, rather than recognizing the active role we play in hindering our own progress. It is the ultimate manifestation of letting everything affect you, because your internal world, driven by fear and chaos, actively works against your explicit intentions. These three phenomena, overthinking, emotional chaos, and self-sabotage, are not isolated incidents, but rather inextricably linked, forming a reinforcing feedback loop. Overthinking fuels the intensity and duration of emotional chaos, which in turn depletes the mental resources needed for rational decision-making, paving the way for self-sabotaging behaviors. Each feeds the other, creating a downward spiral that becomes increasingly difficult to escape without conscious intervention. At the heart of this cycle lies the illusion of external control, the pervasive belief that if only circumstances, people, or events outside of us were different, then our internal state would finally align with peace and contentment. This belief system traps us in a reactive mode, perpetually waiting for the world to change before we allow ourselves to truly live. It is a fundamental misattribution of power, ceding control of our inner world to the unpredictable and uncontrollable external environment. This initial recognition, the stark awareness of how profoundly we have been operating under this illusion, is not an act of self-blame, but rather the first essential step towards reclaiming our agency and dismantling the chains that bind us to constant reaction and suffering. Our second crucial insight on the path to reclaiming control and truly stopping everything from affecting you centers on cultivating the profound skill of detachment and objectivity. This is not about becoming cold or indifferent. Rather, it is the sophisticated practice of learning to observe your thoughts, your emotions, and even your physical sensations without immediately identifying with them, without judgment, and without allowing them to dictate your entire reality. It is the fundamental shift from being completely submerged within the tumultuous waters of your inner experience to becoming the calm observer on the shore. Imagine your mind as a vast open sky. Thoughts are merely clouds passing through it, some dark and stormy, some light and fleeting, some dense and persistent. Emotions are the changing weather patterns: a sudden gust of anger, a gentle drizzle of sadness, a bright burst of joy. The critical mistake many of us make, the very mechanism that allows everything to affect us, is that we mistake ourselves for the clouds, the storms, or the sun. We become our thoughts, we become our emotions, and in that identification, we lose our inherent stability and spaciousness. Detachment in this context means recognizing that you are the sky, always present, always vast, always fundamentally unchanged by what passes through it. The clouds come and go, the weather shifts, but the sky remains the sky. This powerful analogy underpins the practice. When a worrying thought arises, instead of diving into its narrative, analyzing it, fighting it, or letting it spiral into an endless chain of anxieties, the practice of detachment invites you to simply notice it. You might mentally label it, "There's a worrying thought about the presentation," or, "Anxiety is present." This simple act of labeling, of naming what is happening, creates a subtle but immensely powerful distance. It signals to your brain that this is an object of your awareness, not the sum total of your being. This approach directly confronts overthinking. Overthinking thrives on identification. It feeds on the belief that if you think about something enough, you will control it, solve it, or prevent a negative outcome. But often, this obsessive rumination only serves to amplify the problem, creating more stress and less clarity. By observing thoughts rather than participating in them, you begin to interrupt this destructive loop. You acknowledge the thought's presence without granting it executive power over your state. You see it as mental activity, a neural firing, an echo of past experiences or future fears, but not as an undeniable truth that demands your full emotional investment. The same principle applies to emotional chaos. Intense emotions can feel overwhelming, like a tsunami threatening to engulf you. When we identify with them, we become angry, we are sad, we embody fear. Detachment teaches us to experience emotions as sensations in the body, as energetic shifts, as temporary states, rather than as defining characteristics. When anger flares, instead of reacting impulsively, you can observe the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the rapid pulse. You acknowledge anger is here, rather than declaring, "I am angry." This subtle linguistic and experiential shift is profound. It allows the emotion to be present without consuming you. You create space for it to naturally rise and fall, understanding that all emotions, like waves, are impermanent. By giving them this space, by not fighting them or holding on to them, you allow them to dissipate much more quickly and with less destructive impact. This is not repression, it is conscious processing. This practice also serves as a potent antidote to self-sabotage. Self-sabotage often springs from deeply ingrained patterns of thought and emotions, fears of success, beliefs of unworthiness, desires for immediate gratification overriding long-term goals. When an impulse to procrastinate, to doubt yourself, or to engage in a self-destructive behavior arises, the ability to observe that impulse objectively becomes your superpower. Instead of automatically acting on the urge, you can pause. You can notice the thought, "I'm not good enough for this," or "I should just give up." You can feel the accompanying wave of despair or apathy. But with detachment, you don't become that despair. You simply see it. You recognize it as an old pattern, a conditioned response, not an absolute command. This pause, this moment of objective observation, creates a critical window of opportunity. In that space, you can consciously choose a different response, aligning your actions with your higher intentions rather than being dragged down by unconscious triggers. You reclaim agency. To cultivate this skill, consistent practice is key. Mindfulness meditation is perhaps the most direct route. It trains you to pay attention to the present moment, including your thoughts and emotions, without judgment. Simple exercises like the observing breath anchor your awareness, then gently expand it to notice what else is arising in your internal landscape. When a thought comes, you don't chase it. You notice it, acknowledge its presence, and then gently return your attention to your breath. It's like training a puppy. It will wander, but you gently guide it back. Over time, this strengthens your observer self, the part of you that can witness your internal world without being swept away by it. Another practical technique is cognitive diffusion. This involves mentally separating yourself from your thoughts. For example, if you have a recurring negative thought like, "I'm a failure," you might try saying it aloud in a funny voice, or repeating it until it loses its meaning, or simply adding the phrase, "I am having the thought that," before it. I am having the thought that I'm a failure. This simple linguistic tweak creates a barrier, a mental space between you and the thought, reducing its power and believability. It highlights that thoughts are just words, not absolute reflections of reality. The profound insight here is that you are not your thoughts, nor are you your emotions. They are aspects of your experience, internal phenomena that arise and pass. By cultivating detachment and objectivity, you empower yourself to navigate your inner world with a newfound serenity and wisdom. You learn that feeling an emotion does not mean you have to act on it. Thinking a thought does not mean it is true, nor does it mean you have to dwell on it. This liberation from the constant identification with your inner commentary is the bedrock of true resilience. It allows you to face external challenges and internal struggles not from a place of fear or reactivity, but from a grounded center of awareness. You stop letting everything affect you because you understand that your core self, your intrinsic peace, remains untouched by the transient nature of thoughts and feelings. You become the sky, vast and unperturbed, no matter the weather passing through. This is the pathway to emotional freedom, the cessation of overthinking's tyranny, and the end of self-sabotage's insidious grip. It is the art of being fully present without being fully consumed. The core message of this crucial point centers on the profound principle of distinguishing between an external event and our chosen response to it. Far too often, we live in a state of reactive existence, where the ebb and flow of our inner world are dictated entirely by the external tides. A harsh word, an unexpected setback, a perceived slight, a looming deadline, any of these can instantly plunge us into a maelstrom of emotional chaos, overthinking, and a cascade of self-sabotaging behaviors. We become emotional hostages, perpetually waiting for the next external trigger to define our mood, our productivity, and ultimately our peace. This key insight challenges that default mode of operation, urging us to reclaim our inner sovereignty by mastering the art of intentional response. It's not about ignoring reality or suppressing legitimate feelings. Rather, it's about creating a conscious, deliberate pause between stimulus and reaction. This pause is the fertile ground where true personal power resides. Imagine a scenario where an unexpected criticism lands on you. The knee-jerk reaction might be defensiveness, anger, sadness, or a spiraling into self-doubt. These are automatic, deeply ingrained neural pathways that have been reinforced over years. However, an intentional response invites you to step back even for a mere second and observe that initial surge of emotion without immediately identifying with it or acting upon it. It's akin to witnessing a cloud pass across the sky. You acknowledge its presence, perhaps even its imposing form, but you understand you are not the cloud. You are the vast, unchanging sky. The fundamental premise here is that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we possess absolute dominion over how we interpret and respond to those happenings. This distinction is paramount. Our suffering often arises not from the event itself, but from our judgment, our resistance, and our chosen narrative around it. For instance, a traffic jam is an objective fact, but the frustration, anger, or despair it might evoke are entirely subjective responses. By becoming aware of this gap, we begin to dismantle the illusion that external circumstances hold ultimate power over our internal state. We transition from being passengers in our emotional lives to becoming conscious navigators. To cultivate this mastery, several core practices become indispensable. The first is the practice of observational awareness. This involves learning to detach from our immediate thoughts and feelings, treating them as objects of observation rather than defining truths. When an unpleasant feeling arises, perhaps anxiety about an uncertain future or irritation with a colleague, instead of being consumed by it, we practice noticing it. We might say to ourselves, I am noticing a feeling of anxiety, or I am observing the thought that this situation is unfair. This simple act of linguistic separation creates a crucial distance. It prevents us from merging with the emotion, granting us the space to choose how to engage with it, rather than being swept away by its current. This is not about intellectualizing emotions away, but rather about creating a mindful container for them. Furthermore, this principle encourages us to delve deeper than surface-level reactions to identify the underlying triggers and wounds. Often, our disproportionate emotional responses are not solely about the present situation, but rather echoes of past experiences, unresolved fears, or deeply held insecurities. A minor oversight at work might trigger intense feelings of inadequacy if we carry a core belief about not being good enough. By developing the capacity for intentional response, we gain the clarity to ask, is this reaction truly proportional to the present event, or is something deeper being stirred within me? This self-inquiry is a powerful tool for self-understanding and ultimately for healing. It prevents us from perpetually reacting from unaddressed wounds and allows us to respond from a place of conscious awareness. The practical application of intentional response begins with the deliberate act of creating a pause. When a challenging situation arises, instead of immediately lashing out, retreating, or spiraling into rumination, we consciously intervene. This could be a physical act, like taking a deep breath, counting to 10, or stepping away from the immediate environment. It could also be a mental act, such as visualizing a stop sign, mentally repeating a calming mantra, or simply acknowledging the surge of emotion without judgment. This pause is not an empty void. It is a sacred space where wisdom can emerge. In this space, we can ask ourselves crucial questions. Is this reaction serving my highest good? What is the most constructive way to respond here? What outcome do I truly desire? This deliberate pause empowers us to reframe the situation. Instead of defaulting to a narrative of victimhood or catastrophe, we can actively seek alternative perspectives. Is this setback a permanent failure or a temporary challenge offering valuable lessons? Is this criticism an attack or an opportunity for growth? This reframing is not about putting on rose-tinted glasses, but about consciously choosing an interpretation that empowers us rather than disempowering us. It acknowledges that meaning is often assigned, not inherent, and we have the power to assign a meaning that fosters resilience and progress. Moreover, the cultivation of intentional response is deeply intertwined with emotional literacy. Naming our emotions accurately helps to diffuse their overwhelming power. Instead of saying, "I feel bad," articulating, "I feel frustrated because my expectations weren't met," or "I feel sad because of this loss," allows for more precise processing. This precision moves us beyond a generalized state of emotional chaos into a more nuanced understanding, allowing us to address the root of the feeling rather than being subsumed by its intensity. Ultimately, mastering intentional response is about cultivating inner sovereignty. It is the realization that your internal landscape is your domain, a territory you govern regardless of the external weather. It means developing a robust sense of self that is not easily swayed by the opinions of others, the unpredictable turns of life, or the inevitable challenges that arise. The benefits are transformative, a significant reduction in overthinking as you learn to process thoughts rather than endlessly loop them, a profound decrease in emotional chaos as you gain mastery over your reactions, and a liberation from self-sabotage as you break free from reactive patterns that undermine your goals and well-being. This practice is not about achieving perfect emotional control, which is an unrealistic aspiration, but about developing the muscle of conscious choice. It is a lifelong journey of self-awareness and self-mastery, enabling you to navigate life's inevitable storms with an unshakable sense of peace, purpose, and profound inner strength. This practice is the cornerstone of true resilience, allowing you to not just survive challenges, but to thrive amidst them, empowered by the knowledge that your response is always your own. Our fourth crucial step on the path to breaking free from the relentless grip of overthinking, emotional chaos, and self-sabotage demands a profound look at how we delineate our personal space and responsibilities through the establishment and unwavering upholding of personal boundaries and by mastering our locus of control. These are not merely defensive mechanisms, they are foundational pillars for mental resilience and emotional sovereignty. Without clearly defined boundaries, we become permeable, allowing every external stimulus, every passing mood of another, every societal expectation, and every unsolicited opinion to infiltrate our inner sanctuary. This unchecked influx is precisely what fuels the sensation of being constantly affected, leading to an exhaustion that drains our spirit and distorts our perception of self. Think of boundaries not as walls to isolate yourself, but as intelligent filters that protect your energy, time, and emotional well-being. They are the invisible lines we draw to communicate what is acceptable and what is not in our interactions with the world and its inhabitants. There are numerous forms these boundaries take, each vital. Emotional boundaries shield your feelings from being dictated by the volatile moods or judgments of others. They teach you not to internalize or take personally what belongs to someone else. Mental boundaries safeguard your thoughts, preventing intrusive ideas, excessive rumination on others' problems, or the absorption of negative influences from polluting your inner narrative. Time boundaries are perhaps the most tangible, requiring us to consciously say no to demands on our schedule that would compromise our rest, focus, or personal pursuits. Physical boundaries protect our personal space and comfort with touch. In our hyper-connected age, digital boundaries are equally critical, involving the conscious limitation of screen time, notifications, and engagement with toxic online interactions. The challenge in setting these boundaries is deeply rooted in our psychology and societal conditioning. Many of us grapple with a profound fear of disapproval or rejection, a primal human need to belong that often overrides our self-preservation instincts. We feel immense guilt, perceiving the act of prioritizing our own needs as selfish. A lack of self-worth can further exacerbate this, leading us to believe our needs are secondary or less valid than others. Past experiences where our boundaries were violated or disrespected can make us hesitant to even attempt to reestablish them. And for those with ingrained people-pleasing tendencies, setting a boundary feels like an act of betrayal, triggering an automatic response to seek external validation by accommodating others at our own expense. This chronic inability or unwillingness to set boundaries creates a direct pathway to overthinking, emotional chaos, and self-sabotage. When boundaries are weak, our minds become a constant battleground, relentlessly overthinking what others think of us, what we should have done differently, or how to manage the escalating expectations of others. We replay scenarios, dissect conversations, and anticipate potential conflicts, all because we haven't adequately defined where our responsibility ends and theirs begins. Emotionally, without clear delineations, we become sponges, absorbing others' anxieties, frustrations, and sadness. This leads to empathy fatigue, an inability to differentiate our own authentic feelings from those we've absorbed, resulting in a state of perpetual emotional chaos and instability. The gravest consequence is self-sabotage. By constantly prioritizing others' needs and denying our own, we neglect our personal growth, burn out, miss crucial opportunities, and fail to pursue our aspirations, all because our vital energy and focus are continuously siphoned away. To begin the arduous yet liberating process of setting boundaries, self-awareness is paramount. Pay close attention to subtle cues. Feelings of resentment, persistent fatigue, explicable irritation, or a profound sense of being drained are often red flags signaling a boundary violation. Next, clarify your core values and needs. What do you genuinely require to feel safe, respected, productive, and at peace? Once identified, communicate these boundaries clearly, respectfully, and assertively. Use I statements. I am unable to assist with that right now. I need to take some time for myself this evening, or I will not be discussing that topic. Be direct, concise, and firm, without aggression or apology. Start small, practicing with less challenging situations or individuals. Most importantly, consistency is non-negotiable. Expect pushback, for change can be uncomfortable for those accustomed to your previous lack of boundaries. Be prepared to reiterate and reinforce your limits patiently but resolutely. This leads us organically to the concept of the locus of control, an idea intrinsically linked to the effectiveness of boundaries. The locus of control refers to the degree to which individuals believe they have control over the events that affect them. An external locus of control means believing that outside forces, fate, luck, or other people are primarily responsible for your outcomes and emotional state. This mindset is the very definition of being affected by everything. It fosters a sense of victimhood, helplessness, and anxiety as you perceive yourself as a passive recipient of circumstances. Conversely, an internal locus of control is the empowering belief that you are primarily responsible for your own outcomes, efforts, and responses. It acknowledges your agency and power of choice, enabling you to actively decide how you react rather than being swept along by external currents. Shifting to an internal locus of control is a transformative journey. It begins with a rigorous mental exercise, consciously identifying what you can and cannot control. You unequivocally control your efforts, your attitude, your choices, your reactions, and, crucially, your boundaries. You do not control others' opinions, global events, the past, or how others react to your boundaries. The profound liberation comes from deliberately redirecting your mental and emotional energy away from what is outside your control and channeling it entirely into what is within your sphere of influence. This practice demands radical acceptance of what cannot be changed, thereby reducing unnecessary resistance and suffering. Instead of agonizing over a desired outcome that may be partially external, focus intensely on the process and your contribution to it. What actionable steps can you take? How can you show up? The synergistic power of establishing robust boundaries and cultivating an internal locus of control is immense. Boundaries are the practical action of setting limits, informed by an internal understanding of self-worth and what you can control: your space, your time, your energy. An internal locus of control is the underlying mindset that empowers you to set and maintain those boundaries, recognizing that others' reactions to your limits are their responsibility, not yours to absorb or fix. Together, they construct a robust defense against being overwhelmed. They actively dismantle the cycle of self-sabotage by preserving your precious energy, allowing you to invest it purposefully in what truly aligns with your values and goals. The long-term benefits are profound and far-reaching. You will experience a significant increase in self-respect and confidence as you honor your own needs. Stress, anxiety, and resentment will diminish, replaced by a profound sense of inner peace. Decision-making becomes clearer, unclouded by external pressures. Your relationships will evolve, becoming more authentic and fulfilling as you engage from a place of genuine connection rather than obligation or fear. Most importantly, you reclaim a greater capacity for personal growth and goal achievement, no longer hindered by the constant drain of external influences. This dual mastery of boundaries and locus of control is not just a technique, it is the ultimate pathway to true freedom from letting everything affect you, allowing you to live a life directed by your own intention and inner strength. Our fifth crucial point revolves around the profound and transformative act of cultivating intentional action and reclaiming your power by rigorously focusing on what you can truly control. This principle is not merely about positive thinking, but a fundamental shift in perspective and daily practice that directly counters the feeling of being perpetually affected by external circumstances, internal turmoil, and the actions of others. When we feel overwhelmed, emotionally chaotic, or engage in self-sabotage, it often stems from a deep-seated sense of powerlessness, a belief that forces outside ourselves dictate our inner state and our life's trajectory. This key point offers the antidote, a deliberate and consistent redirection of energy towards the levers of influence that are genuinely at our disposal. The journey begins with radical awareness. Most of us operate on autopilot, allowing our attention to be pulled in countless directions by the news, social media, other people's opinions, past regrets, or future anxieties. Very little of this, upon closer inspection, falls within our immediate sphere of control. The first step, therefore, is to pause and meticulously identify what truly belongs to you to manage, shape, or alter. This requires an honest appraisal, distinguishing between what can be influenced and what simply must be accepted. What is within your control? Predominantly, it is your internal landscape and your intentional responses. You have control over your thoughts, not necessarily the initial appearance of a thought, but your engagement with it, your decision to entertain it, challenge it, or let it pass. You control your reactions to events and people. While an external event might trigger an initial emotional surge, the duration and intensity of that emotion and how you choose to express or process it is ultimately your domain. Your actions, your choices, your effort, your attitude, and your boundaries are all entirely within your purview. You decide how you allocate your time, whom you allow into your inner circle, and what you prioritize. You control your self-care practices, your commitment to personal growth, and where you direct your focus and attention. This list, once genuinely contemplated, reveals a vast landscape of personal power. Conversely, it is equally vital to understand and accept what is outside your control. Other people's opinions, their choices, their moods, or their perceptions of you are not yours to manage. Past events are immutable. They have happened, and while you can learn from them, you cannot change them. Future outcomes beyond your direct contribution are largely beyond your grasp. You can influence probabilities through your actions, but you cannot guarantee specific results. External circumstances such as the weather, global events, economic shifts, or random occurrences are simply elements of the larger world that operate independently of your will. The persistent attempt to control these uncontrollable elements is the root cause of much anxiety, frustration, and a profound feeling of being constantly affected. It's like trying to command the tides, a futile exercise that drains your energy and leaves you exhausted. The core practice of this key point is the conscious redirection of energy. Once you have discerned between the controllable and the uncontrollable, the work begins. For every instance where you find yourself fixating on something outside your control, ruminating on a past mistake, worrying about a colleague's judgment, or fretting over an uncertain future, you must deliberately pivot. Ask yourself, what can I do about this right now? If the answer is genuinely nothing, then the courageous and freeing act is to practice acceptance and immediately shift your focus to something you can control. This is not about denial, it's about intelligent energy management. Acceptance is not resignation, it is a strategic decision to release your grip on what you cannot change, thereby freeing up mental and emotional resources to invest in what you can. This intentional redirection manifests through micro-actions. Power is not reclaimed in one grand gesture, but in a series of small, consistent, and deliberate choices. Instead of overthinking a perceived slight, choose to establish a clearer boundary in your next interaction. Instead of being emotionally chaotic over an unexpected setback, choose to calmly assess your next practical step. Instead of self-sabotaging by procrastinating, choose to commit to 5 minutes of focused work. Each micro-action, no matter how small, is a vote for your agency, a reinforcement of your internal locus of control, and a practical demonstration to yourself that you are not merely a passenger in your own life. By consistently exercising this muscle of intentional action, you begin to build profound resilience. When you understand that your peace and progress are tied not to external validation or circumstance, but to your internal responses and deliberate choices, you become less susceptible to external turbulence. Your emotional fortitude strengthens because you are no longer buffeted by every changing wind. You develop a sense of inner steadfastness, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you possess the tools to navigate challenges, even if you cannot prevent them. The impact on overthinking is immediate and significant. Overthinking thrives in the vacuum of inaction, spiraling through hypothetical scenarios and uncontrollable variables. When you shift your focus to what you can control and take action, even small steps, you interrupt this destructive cycle. Action becomes the antidote to analysis paralysis. Your mind, instead of endlessly replaying scenarios, becomes engaged in problem-solving and constructive engagement with reality. Similarly, emotional chaos finds less fertile ground when intentional action takes root. Many emotional upheavals stem from feeling overwhelmed by situations where we perceive ourselves as helpless. By identifying and acting upon the controllable elements, you regain a sense of mastery and efficacy. This sense of capability inherently reduces feelings of anxiety, frustration, and sadness, replacing them with a grounded sense of purposeful engagement. You move from being a victim of your emotions to an active participant in their regulation. Finally, this principle is a potent weapon against self-sabotage. Self-sabotage often manifests as a resistance to taking necessary steps driven by fear, insecurity, or a misguided sense of protecting oneself from potential failure. When you commit to focusing on what you can control, your effort, your preparation, your persistence, you dismantle the justifications for inaction. Each intentional action aligns you more closely with your goals and values, eroding the patterns of self-sabotage that keep you stuck. In essence, cultivating intentional action and reclaiming your power through focusing on what you can control is the ultimate pathway to breaking free from the pervasive feeling of being affected by everything. It transforms you from a reactive individual tossed about by life's waves into a proactive navigator, skillfully steering your own ship. It fosters a deep sense of inner peace, increases your self-efficacy, and cultivates an authentic freedom that emanates not from external circumstances, but from within your deliberate and conscious engagement with your own existence. This is where true agency lies. We've explored the profound journey toward reclaiming your inner peace. Remember, true freedom lies not in controlling the world around you, but in mastering your reactions to it. By understanding the roots of overthinking, you begin to dismantle its grip. Through conscious effort, emotional chaos can transform into calm clarity. Self-sabotage, often a hidden pattern, becomes visible and conquerable once you commit to self-awareness and intentional action. This isn't about ignoring challenges, but about refusing to let them define your state of being. It's about cultivating an unshakable inner core, choosing your response and steering your own narrative. Embrace the power you hold to shape your internal landscape, fostering resilience and building a life where you are truly in command of your peace.